Hi, do you have a dog who is restless much of the time? Like they don't seem to be able to settle down anywhere. They're always pacing up and down, or most of the time pacing up and down. And do they seem constantly on high alert, as if expecting danger? And yet, it doesn't feel like separation anxiety to you because they don't panic when you leave. And so you want to help your dog, but you don't know what the problem is. So in this video, I'm going to explain that the problem probably is generalized anxiety because not all anxiety is separation anxiety. So let's first look at some common causes of generalized anxiety. As in all anxiety problems, very often there is a biological predisposition towards anxiety. So some dogs suffer from generalized anxiety because their brain's alarm system is too reactive. In other words, there's a brain structure called the amygdala, which is responsible for processing emotional states. And there is another part of the brain called the hippocampus, which, if it's a bit on the smaller side, it is less equipped to regulate fear and anxiety related behaviors. So, when the amygdala perceives threats where none exist, then we say that it's too reactive. It's like it's the alarm system telling the rest of the body that, oh, there's a threat out there. And meanwhile, there's no threat necessarily. I mean, obviously, sometimes there are real threats, but I'm talking about anxious dogs having their alarm system so reactive that they perceive threats where none exist. Then there are also medical conditions that can cause generalized anxiety. One of them is a thyroid disease. And of course, only a vet can run the necessary tests to come to that conclusion. Another cause of generalized anxiety is low blood sugar. Now, low blood sugar can be a chronic condition, and once again, you need the vet to help your dog regulate it or stabilize it. But there's also low blood sugar can also be caused by your dog going for too many hours without eating. So, for example, if you feed your dog once a day only, that might actually be too little because he goes for 24 hours without eating. And then, of course, that is going to bring the sugar level down in the blood. So the ideal situation, if you have an adult dog, is to feed him twice a day. If you have an older dog, 3 times a day. And if you have a puppy, a very young puppy, just follow your vet's instructions. But I just mentioned biological conditions and medical conditions just to help you realize that not all anxiety is behavioral. If there is a medical condition or a biological predisposition, then there is a tendency for your dog to be anxious without you having done absolutely anything wrong. So now let's look at some common causes of generalized anxiety. Um, One of the causes is your dog having experienced negative or having gone through negative experiences in early life. For example, one example of a negative experience would be um, you bring him home and the first few nights he's getting used to a new family, to a new environment, and he's scared. He's away from mom, he's away from siblings, new environment, strange people. And then instead of comforting him, you let him cry it out. Now, I know that whatever mistakes we make with our dogs, it's not because we don't love them, but it's because we don't know any better. So anything that I say that resonates like a mistake to you, please don't feel judged because that's not my intention at all. So, um, letting your puppy cry out during the night, the first few nights, that is a negative experience that can contribute to him having generalized anxiety later on. Another cause of generalized anxiety is living in an unpredictable environment. So, the environment may be unpredictable in many ways. He may have routines that aren't very stable, like eating at very different times of the day, being walked at different times, like sometimes he eats at 7 a.m. and sometimes at 9 and sometimes at 8. And I'm just talking about breakfast. Or sometimes he goes for a walk at 11 in the morning, sometimes at 7 in the morning. So when routines are unstable, then that contributes to unpredictability. Being unpredictable also means you responding to your dog in different ways. Let's say he has a certain behavior, like jumping on you, and sometimes you pat him when he jumps, sometimes you ignore him, and at other times you tell him off. Now, that is another way of being unpredictable. So, why should the unpredictable environment cause generalized anxiety? Because unpredictability means that your dog can't learn what's coming next. So if he doesn't know what's coming next, that is going to create uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers anxiety quite often. Another cause of generalized anxiety is badly timed punishment. Now, I'm not a fan of punishment at all because there are other ways to teach your dog to do the right thing. But if you decide to punish him for something, it has to be, the punishment has to happen if you catch your dog in the act of doing something wrong. So badly timed punishment is punishment that happens quite a few minutes or very often even hours after the so-called misbehavior. So why does this lead to anxiety? Because your dog did the wrong thing, but he also did other things. He had water, he played with a toy, he took a nap, whatever. And you come home and you punish him. And you punish him because he peed in the house. So he won't be able to associate the punishment with having peed in the house because peeing in the house isn't the only thing he did. He did other things like taking a nap and playing with a toy. And so he can't associate the behavior to the punishment. And also, dogs learn by association. And so, if peeing happens much longer before the punishment, then he can't make the association just because too much time has lapsed between peeing and being punished. And so, when he can't associate the punishment to a certain behavior, he can't do anything to avoid having that behavior in future. And so, because he can't avoid having the behavior, he also can't escape the punishment. So in the end, he knows that there will be punishment when you come home, because usually there is, but he doesn't know why. And that is what's going to lead to anxiety. It's almost like, can you imagine if you were always expecting punishment, but you don't know when it's coming? So that's why badly timed punishment is something that you should try to avoid. Now, let's look at what generalized anxiety looks like. So, in other words, let's look at the symptoms. One of them is your dog having exaggerated responses to harmless events. For example, the exhaust pipe of a car backfires, and this happens quite far away, and he hears the sound and he goes into like panic mode, into escape mode. That is an exaggerated response to a harmless event. Okay. Or another example would be if you like you're playing with him and you lift up your hand and he gets scared. He thinks you're going to hit him. So that is another exaggerated response to a harmless event because you just lifted your arm and he cringed in fear. Another symptom is irritability. Now let's look at this photo. In normal circumstances, or if your dog didn't suffer from generalized anxiety, he might not enjoy being handled like this, but he would probably not snap right away. And so irritability means that when your dog doesn't like something, he will snap right away. He won't even try to avoid the situation or walk away from it. Anxious dogs also tend to be very sensitive to noise and to light. So it's not unusual for anxious dogs to go and hide somewhere, retreat to a quiet room in the house if you have loud visitors or if you're throwing a party and things are getting loud, or for them to look for a darker corner if it's too bright. Another symptom is acting nervous most of the time. This agitation, it's like I mentioned at the beginning of this video. They can't seem to settle. They always pacing, or if they settle, they don't settle for long. He'll lie down somewhere, and then 1 minute later, they will go and lie somewhere else, or they're just in constant motion. That is a good description, constant motion, because that's exactly what happens. Dogs with generalized anxiety also have a lot of difficulty being focused or concentrating, especially during training. So they will do things like the fourth time you ask them to sit, they will just go somewhere else. Or if you're teaching them to lie down, for example, and they will just like look at your hand as if trying to figure it all out, and then suddenly start whimpering and then walking away. Or you're trying to teach them eye contact and they keep on shifting their eyes, looking everywhere except at you. So, or if you make the training session quite long, eventually they give up and they go and do something else. Another symptom is disrupted sleep quality, which means your dog wakes up quite often, or he can't really. Now, when I say settle, he can't settle, I mean when he goes to sleep, he either wakes up often or he stays awake for a very long time. He can also startle when he's sleeping, like suddenly waking up as if he's totally in a total panic. And then anxious dogs very often, like this photo here at the bottom shows, they very often have this worried expression. They also have a natural tendency to avoid unknown situations and unknown people. For example, the first time your dog has to go up a staircase, they may really hesitate for a very, very long time. They may look at the stairs and then walk away and then approach again and then sit and then look at you and then look at the stairs and whimper a little bit and then just go up one step and come back. So anything that is unknown, whether it's people or situations or other animals, they will naturally avoid as the first option. So in other words, there are dogs that show a lot of curiosity. And so, in the face of new things, they want to explore them. Anxious dogs do the opposite. Anything that's unknown seems a bit scary to them, quite scary to them, and so they avoid it. They can also startle for no apparent reason, and your dog, like, he may be playing with a toy and then he suddenly starts looking around as if something happened, and that is a startle response. Or if they're lying down and for some reason they don't hear you approach and you touch them just to give them a gentle pat, they may startle, they may spook. So that is another symptom of generalized anxiety. So I hope so far, this has helped you understand a bit better what is going on with your dog and why it's not separation anxiety. So what can you do? And now I would just like to share a few tips with you of things that you can do to help your anxious dog. So one of them is to meet their emotional needs. Sometimes, or very often, we are told that if our dogs are misbehaving, we should just ignore them. If they ask for attention, we should ignore them because we, the ones who should initiate the interaction. And that's not true. That's not true at all. If your dog needs your attention, that means, or he asks for attention, that means that he needs your reassurance at the moment. And if you don't give him that reassurance, then anxiety may rise. So, my suggestion is if your dog asks for attention in the sense of needing reassurance, give it to him. I'm not talking about attention-seeking barking, when your dog kicks the ball somewhere and the ball rolls under a sofa and then he can't retrieve it and then he starts barking until you get the ball. Or if you're talking on the phone and ignoring them and they start barking because you're ignoring them. I'm not talking about that kind of attention-seeking behavior. I'm talking specifically about your dog needing reassurance. And you may ask, okay, how do I tell that? Very often our intuition tells us the difference, between our dog needing some love at the moment and just demanding attention. Even their expression looks different. Be predictable and reliable because as we discussed at the beginning of this video, unpredictability equals uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers anxiety. Make sure your dog has good quality sleep. This is very important. The bed should be comfortable or wherever he sleeps. If he sleeps with you, then I would imagine you already have a comfortable bed. The temperature in the room should be just right. So this is important for him to have good quality sleep because it is during sleep that stress hormones come down, and so that helps with generalized anxiety. Another thing that's important for you to do is to let your dog feel in control during walks. And what I mean by this is ensure the leash is always loose, um, provided that it's safe for the leash to be quite loose. So that way, when the leash is loose, they feel that they have leeway, to go to walk a bit faster or to walk a bit slower or to veer a bit to the left or to veer a bit to the right. And this is important. If a dog feels that they have no control over what happens to them, then that also triggers anxiety. Should also avoid exercising your dog to the point of exhaustion. Sometimes when we have anxious dogs and they show all this agitation at home, it's easy for us to assume that this is accumulated energy, and so he just needs to run it out. He needs long walks. He needs a lot of intensive exercise, and that is not quite true. In fact, the opposite can happen. If after you take your dog for a walk and you took the leash off somewhere safe and he ran and you come home, and if instead of being tired, he's actually more agitated, then it means that he was exercised to the point of exhaustion. His brain is now hyperactive because too much exercise can release stress hormones. So it can make your dog more anxious instead of making him or her calmer. And because of noise and light sensitivity, it's also important to avoid going to very busy, noisy places, or if you do have to go to those places, if you have to walk your dog in those places because you have no choice, then make the walk as short as possible and then save the longer walks for quieter times of day. And finally, give your dog the freedom to observe and assess potential threats when outdoors. Now, a potential threat is never from our point of view, it's always from your dog's perspective. So let's hear this dog looking at the fire hydrant. I mean, if you're walking your dog and you look at a fire hydrant, it's nothing, it's not a threat. But he may perceive it as a threat, and he may need to stop walking and watch that threat, the fire hydrant, from a safe distance. He may need to like walk past it really quickly. He may need to contour it. And so let them do that, let them see at their own pace, at their own time, if whatever it is that they encounter outside is a threat or not really. So I hope that you found this video helpful, because I know that most of the conversations out there about anxiety are always about separation anxiety. And very often our dogs suffer from generalized anxiety. And so I hope this little presentation helped you gain some insight. And if you enjoyed the video and if you want to learn more about generalized anxiety, separation anxiety, anxiety in rescue dogs, and anxiety in elderly dogs, then we would love you to subscribe, because that's exactly the type of content that we put out there. Take care.